Okay. So we wanted to start with an offering of what youth organizing is. We know that everybody is coming to this webinar from a different context, from a different funding strategy, and from a different organizing understanding. So we wanted to offer a baseline definition of youth organizing as we got started. So what is youth organizing? We'd like to offer this. Youth organizing is an innovative youth development and social justice strategy that trains young people in community organizing and advocacy and empowers them to employ these skills to create meaningful institutional and social change in their communities. And at FCYO, we really think because of who we are as an institution and the work that we value, we think that youth organizing is critical, not only in this moment, but for the long term. So given the current investment in quality public education and strong community infrastructures, the deportation and separation of families, as well as the increased fast track to poverty, unemployment, incarceration, we believe youth organizing has a critical role to play in movement building. But in particular, in this moment, they bring a racial justice analysis, organizing strategy, and a politicized base that will be necessary to move lasting change. And so we hope that you're all on this because you believe in that also, and that you think that youth organizing and young people are critical in this moment. So also wanted to talk a little bit about who we are each as an institution. The Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing is a capacity building and funding intermediary. So we work both with the field of youth organizing as well as philanthropy. And our hope is to move philanthropic investment in youth organizing as a strategy for social change. And we do this in a few ways. We want to build a more powerful and connected youth organizing field and create space for organizers to share strategies and invest in leadership development and expand power. We also want to invest in the individual capacities of organizations on the ground. So we do that through capacity building initiatives and TA opportunities. And then additionally, we provide direct resources to groups on the ground through grant making opportunities, both in some of our cohort models like Pipelines to Power and Healthy Communities, but as well as rapid response opportunities or specific issue opportunities that we fund. And then lastly, as mentioned before, we want to shift the dominant narrative on young people to both kind of broadly in the public to make it clear that young people are critical in social change efforts, but also to move to philanthropic understanding of the impact that young people are making across this country. And so that's some of the work that FCYO does as an institution. And we want to, as things began to play out in the debate post-Parkland, we wanted to, sorry, I'm just gonna have to 86 the slides because it doesn't look like they're working. Let's see. Let's try one more time. So this moment, we wanted to talk more specifically about post-Parkland. We, of course, felt the tragedy and the weight of the moment. And then we also directly got in contact with some of the groups that we supported to understand their analysis and their understanding of the moment. And quickly after, we believe that young people of color have long been at the forefront of demanding safe and healthy schools and just communities. And they've been organizing to address systematically racist policies that have resulted in their communities and schools being under-resourced, over-policed, and disproportionately subject to violence. So we know this has happened historically. We also know that as we watch the current debate swirl around arming of teachers, more arming of school resource officers, more cops in communities, that there was a big red flag. We know the communities of color feel like these solutions might feel like quick fixes, but often lead to the further militarization of schools and criminalization of communities of color, and that there's better opportunity out there. And so some of the opportunity that we saw as we saw the debate unfold was, of course, that there is such a wealth of experience of young people of color that have been long at the forefront of demanding safe, healthy, and just schools and communities, and that we really need to invest in the work that's been happening on the ground for decades. That there's a moment in which we have the opportunity to create a youth-led, multiracial, cross-class movement that is centered on racial justice. That if we continue to focus on racial justice, that solutions that follow will impact communities across the board in a positive way. And that the policies that we're seeing moving in big national debates aren't the solution. That the solution is to lean into work that addresses the systematic injustice that happens on a daily basis, that invests in communities and social institutions that center human connection and supportive relationships. So there's a whole other set of solutions that aren't getting talked about enough. And then, of course, post-Parkland, we saw in the news all over everywhere, young people were saying they were registering to vote, that they were registering their families to vote, and that they were going to hold elected officials accountable in this moment. So there's this huge opportunity to civically engage thousands and thousands of young people that have been activated in this moment. But the other thing that we know is that registered voters doesn't mean that they turn out to the polls, and it doesn't mean that they turn out to the polls in an educated way, and that we know that there's groups on the ground that have been doing this work that have the expertise to both politicize the young people that have been activated in this moment and move them to the polls. So oftentimes in these situations, we wait until the end to share like ways in which you can get engaged. No, we don't want to do that because we want you to think about these opportunities as we move forward. So at FCYO, we created the Youth and Safety for Justice Fund, which is a rapid response fund to invest in young people of color taking action in this moment, with an emphasis on efforts that employ a racial justice lens and connect gun violence to other forms of systematic injustice. And we're continuing to raise money for that fund. From kind of inception of it to launch to grants going out the door, it took us about 2 weeks. We're really proud of our nimbleness in that situation. And we want to continue to get more money to groups on the ground doing this work. But we also know this moment is a moment. And to create lasting change, we want to continue to raise money to invest in those groups because we know they're talking midterms, they're talking 2020. And to sustain this work and the power and the momentum happening, we need to continue to invest in these groups. We always suggest that folks directly invest in groups first. And then when they can't, there's us, there's Communities for Just Schools Fund, there's other ways. But as you think about investing in grassroots organizing groups, that in this moment, we really want folks to consider prioritizing groups that have a history of activating youth of color around these issues. And we know there's hundreds. FCYO has a map. And in that map, we show the hundreds of organizations. It's online, it's interactive. You can get on it. Mona will drop it in the chat link. And you can get on it and search for organizations by issue. You can search them by geography, and you can connect with them directly and see the victories, the hundreds and hundreds of victories that young people are achieving across this country. So we encourage you to get into that. We also encourage you to make long-term investments in organizing. So again, it's the sustainability of moment movements into long-term strategy. The last thing we want to talk about is, again, looping back to the election. So back in 2015, FCYO really felt passionately about the fact that youth organizing and young people were a strategic voting bloc, and that young people needed to be invested in a strategic way, and that would make a significant impact on the elections. Unfortunately, it feels like that didn't happen, but don't worry, we can still change that. And in this moment, it feels like the recommendations that came out of that report are even more pertinent. So it's our now or never report. Mona will also drop it in the chat link. I'll also say that we're dropping a lot of resources and information. We'll share all of this, so don't feel like you have to kind of vigorously take all the notes. We'll send an email out with everything after this. But out of that report came recommendations. One of them was to identify youth-focused strategic initiatives that can drive public discourse and change the issue environment for elections and policy fights. We're seeing that play out in this moment today, that the issue of gun violence has galvanized young people, and they're holding elected officials' feet to the fire because of it. And so how do we continue to use this as a strategic learning opportunity? Again, doubling down on youth organizing groups with a proven track record and executing large-scale voter engagement campaigns, and then scaling up groups that have the capacity to and are ready. And shaping the millennial generation through highly visible moment-to-movement campaigns. We're in that moment right now. And formalizing the leadership pipeline. So young people that come out of youth organizing are primed to go into other forms of organizing, civic engagement, leading campaigns, campaign managers, GOTV campaigns, and running for office. And there's so much opportunity when it comes to the field of youth organizing that we hope that you continue to participate in this webinar through that lens. And with that, I will turn it over to Jamie.
Thanks, Monica, and I'm just going to do the sharing of my screen as well.
I hope your PowerPoint works better than mine.
All right, how's that look? Can everybody see it? Excellent. This is a moment. And again, as Monica and I have already shared with all of you, part of the beauty of the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing and the Communities for Just Schools Fund coming together is that we have a very integrated, I think, shared analysis on what organizing is, because it comes directly from our partners, as well as why it's so important in this moment. So there's much I don't need to say because Monica has covered it so well, and I'm grateful to her for carrying the heavy load. So in this moment, in this post-Parkland moment, the language that we've been using, because it's language that really comes from our partners, is the fact that this is a post-Parkland moment, but this is also a pre-Parkland moment. This moment is not, sadly, a new moment. It is, however, a moment in which the work of our partners is work that is at risk, at tremendous risk, at a new kind of risk. Much like in the time post-Newtown, past the Sandy Hook tragedy, that when there were calls for armed teachers, there were calls for the increased police presence in schools, when the federal government chose to spend millions of dollars on investing in security infrastructure, and that money trickled down to states and localities, we have returned to that moment. But it is a new moment because we have a different kind of administration. There is a different kind of public rhetoric that has been allowed and approved by people publicly around race and racism in this country. And so it requires a different level of action to stand alongside and behind our partners to ensure that we are redirecting resources that, if we do not work hard together, will go to the hardening of schools, which is actually code for the criminalization of young people of color, of LGBTQ youth, of immigrant youth around this country. And so for the Communities for Just Schools Fund, we recognize this moment as an opportunity not to redirect our course, but to double down on the investment that we are making in the amazing efforts of our partners so that we can follow their lead in moving things forward, so that folks understand that school climate and school safety need to be the same conversation. But they're doing this now, this work, in a stiff wind of local, state level, and federal opposition. I could go off on a 15 to 20 minute federal policy and practice diatribe, which I will spare you all. But please know that there are several very harmful federal bills that have been introduced just in the last 2 weeks alone. And that's in addition to the state level and local level battles that our partners are going to speak with you today. And so in order to respond, what we have been working on is taking some of the resources, much of the resources that we as a fund had set aside for 2018 to direct to rapid response, and we are allocating them to this moment and to our partners. And we are saying we will move these resources to you fast, which those of you who are with us in philanthropy know is no small challenge, but we are committed to ensuring that folks are equipped to respond fast and to respond effectively. So who are we as a fund before I get further into what it is we're trying to do with our partners in this moment? What you see here is who we have always been. It isn't changing in this moment. We are a national donor collaborative. We support 50 amazing grassroots organizations in 19 states, 28 if you include the amazing national network partners that are working with us and through the Communities for Just Schools Fund. We are working with them and alongside them to end punitive school discipline practices and law enforcement responses that are disproportionately impacting young people of color, students who are being impacted based on their gender identity, sexual orientation. And they are not advocating just for what they do not want to see in schools anymore. And I think that's a very important part of what we want you to know in this moment. Many of us have been in the work around school discipline reform for many years. And there was a time when our narrative absolutely needed to be singularly focused on the harms that were being perpetrated in schools. We have done that work, and we need to fight hard to maintain the policy and practice wins that we've achieved. But in this moment, the movement has advanced, and what we know now are not only what we do not want to see in school, we know also what we do affirmatively want to see in schools, the kinds of school environments that actually serve all children well, that are situating them for success, that are focused on seeing and acknowledging their genius, and in creating safe and nurturing environments. That sounds like a lot. To some people, when we say that, it sounds soft, but I will tell you right now, that is the hardest work that we can do, and it is absolutely the work of creating safe schools. So how does the Communities for a Just Schools Fund do this work? Again, this is what we have articulated in a strategic plan that we released in this past fall, and this work is not changing in this moment. We are clear that as a national donor collaborative that's resourcing grassroots organizing groups around the country and doing so with an explicit emphasis on elevating the importance of achieving racial justice, that we first and foremost fund. We fund organizations that change schools and education through organizing, through actually saying whose schools are schools and bringing that to life and practice every day. We do that by acknowledging that the organizations that we're funding, by and large, are organizations that operate as if they have staffs of 50 to 100 people and operating budgets that are multi-millions of dollars, when in fact, on average, our typical organizing group has a budget of $650,000. They are achieving miracles every day. And I make that point in this moment because when they face these stiff winds of opposition, they don't have the flexibility that many other organizations might have to say, okay, we'll redirect $3,500, $5,000, $10,000 to this new moment. So these moments for them are make or break moments, and we have an opportunity to stand with them and ensure that they have the resources they need to move forward. What else does CJSF do? We build, we connect, and we lead. And again, these are all things that you're seeing through us launching the Transforming School Safety Rapid Response Fund. We are seeking to ensure in this moment that our partners have the resources that they need to do the communications work that this moment calls for. There have been so many harmful messages that have been coming out. I'm not going to even talk about them because they don't deserve the light of day, other than to say, when people are saying guns don't kill people, schools kill people as a message on Capitol Hill, there's a deeply embedded message around racism within that messaging that we have work to do to counter. And so in this moment, in addition to the rapid response dollars that we are directing out into the field, we know that we need to do more to equip our partners to have access to the communications resources that allow their voices to be centered in the national media. So there will be more coming out from us on that piece of it. We connect. We do things like this. We bring together the power of philanthropy and the power of grassroots organizing. We ensure that folks in positions of power and influence, those who are pursuing this work from a policy advocacy or legal advocacy perspective, are connected with our organizers, and that they see the expertise that our organizers bring to this work as absolutely central to how we're going to create schools that are what all children deserve. And we do this by leading. And when I say that, what that means is we lead within philanthropy, we lead alongside all of you by, again, helping everyone to see that our communities know what they need, and we have an opportunity to ensure that we are directing resources to them in the most simple of ways and sending a strong message that they know what they need and that we can partner with them and that we can help to translate those successes into the institutions that we all work with every day in order to celebrate success and move forward in strength. This is an example of what this means. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to let you know about an event that we are doing in partnership with several of the groups who are on the call today, who you'll hear from directly, Power U and the Dream Defenders in particular. But I just wanted to show you this because, again, in the spirit of build, connect, and lead, in addition to directing resources out into the field, we know that the messaging of our partners is really important. And so this briefing that we'll be doing next week is about helping folks to understand that literally, quite literally, the bodies of young people of color, of LGBTQ youth in public schools around this country, their bodies are not safe. They are not emotionally safe either. And so the webinar that we'll be hosting next week, and we'll drop a link into the chat box so you can register if you haven't already, is a chance to really think about, not just in this moment, but moving forward, what does it mean to understand the school discipline frame that so many of us have been committed to for so long in the context of the ways in which young people are encouraging us to push forward curriculum, to push forward the kinds of supports they need to see in schools. And for our partners in Miami, reproductive justice is restorative justice. It is how we're going to get to safe and supportive schools in this moment. So we encourage you to join us on that webinar. And then finally, here's just a couple of clips. We are proud of our partners. Again, they face these stiff winds of opposition, and yet despite that, their political analysis, the ways in which their messaging is being heard, it is out there. These are just a few examples, and we'll drop the links to these particular articles into the chat box as well. Help us a little bit. Tweet these articles out. Add your own messages of support and solidarity to them. This is just a sample. If you have others that you know come from groups who are doing amazing community organizing, drop those into the chat box too. We have to get ahead of the counter narrative around safety that is, again, about hardening our schools, about keeping kids safe by focusing all of our resources on these terrible tragedies, which, yes, we absolutely must prevent, but they are rare. And so if we focus our resources only on responding to moments of crisis, what we will end up with are schools that we already have. We have schools in communities of color in urban areas that look like and feel like prisons, and that is not what we want for children anywhere. It is not what we want for any of our children. And so we have a chance to work together. So if you're interested in learning more, here's as someone who would like to apply for funding, we know we have some partners on the line with us today. You can contact our amazing program officer, Sina, who's on the line as well today, and we'll be talking in a minute. Or you can contact me if you're interested in hearing about not only how you can contribute directly to the fund, and we'll be doing the kind of collective narrative storytelling to ensure that we can see the results of our collective effort, or we are really encouraging aligned funding as well. And so we'd be happy to speak with you if you are somebody who's working in a specific region or state or city about the rapid response requests that we are receiving in this moment, to ensure we're connecting you directly with our partners and our allies who are seeking the resources, again, that they need in this moment to ensure that we are building towards truly safe and supportive schools. And so with that, Monica, am I turning it over to the video right now? Is that correct? Yes. So we're going to be turning to our partners in a moment, and in order to do that, we're going to hand it over to our amazing program officers, Hashim Bemford and Thina Robinson-Mock. But first, we actually wanted to take you into the life experience of an amazing youth organizer named Gloria. And Gloria, it works with the Youth Justice Coalition out of Los Angeles. She has a story to tell us all that from our perspective, centers what safety has not been for youth of color around this nation for too long. And it's a counter to the story that what we need to do is to focus on hardening. Instead, we need to focus on how we are embracing all young people and seeing their beauty and their genius. And I know for sure you'll see that as we do, Gloria's genius is about to shine through for all of you. So I'm going to hand it over to Hashim.
449-1120. When I was 12 years old, I was really shy. I was just a normal little girl, you know, that was just like excited about middle school.
When I first saw Gloria, I wasn't sure if she was a high school student or what. But once she opened her mouth, I was very impressed.
The assumptions that I've made when I was younger of students that would get in trouble, it would just be that they were bad. I never gave it any thought. But in reality, when something is going on, there's way more underneath that's causing this to happen.
Many of the young people that I've worked with are young people that are facing and have faced major trauma in their lives. We see an increasingly younger group of people being targeted and criminalized.
2483, go ahead.
There was this guy, he would always want to cut me in the lunch line. first I would let them, but then it got to where they weren't asking. They would just always do it. One day I was like, no, you can't. Then before I even realized, he swung at me. Some of my friends just started fighting this guy. Other people came and they started fighting. So then everyone was fighting. I remember being so afraid that I couldn't even breathe. There was just so much commotion. The only way to get out was to climb the fence. I ended up getting caught by a school police officer. He was like, we know it's you. We know that you're the one that started all of this. And then he told me that he had to handcuff me because he needed to set an example out of me. And I just remember, like, I was so scared. I wanted to cry. I was just thinking, like, damn, my mom is gonna be so upset at me.
The literature teaches us, as soon as you have contact with law enforcement, you're more likely to end up in prison.
I was actually labeled as a troublemaker. I got a $500 ticket. I was transferred to another school. I didn't have any friends. It made me think that something was wrong with me for speaking up.
Many folks of color in schools are being convinced, and eventually they internalize the idea that they are the reason for their failure.
I remember a counselor meeting with me, and I explained to her what had happened. And she was like, oh, that's not true. I'm pretty sure you just don't like school. And I was like, no, I was okay until this happened. She just told me, like, you're already going down that path of being bad. You know, you're going to be incarcerated.
Much of the issues with the school-to-prison pipeline revolve around the zero-tolerance policies. The literature demonstrates that zero-tolerance policies don't actually work. They push kids out of school. They create environments that make them not want to be there.
The next school I was going to, they already assumed that I was going to be like a problematic child. That kind of made me feel like, why am I even here?
Gloria was one of the lucky ones. A lot of students that are pushed out and suspended or expelled and moved to different schools, they never bounce back.
If I could just see them all over and explain to them, I think that they would have made a whole nother choice. The solution was to have counselors come in and talk to us and say, hey, what's wrong? Let's actually kill the issue from the root before it gets bigger.
When I hear stories like Gloria's, it's upsetting and it's heartbreaking, but it's not surprising. The culture in the schools and the policies within the schools and how behavior is responded to is what contributes to the system of mass incarceration.
So why don't we all take a deep breath? I think, it's very different to talk about policies, and it's a whole other thing to hear somebody's individual story. So thank you to Jamie for bringing that video to us. We wanted to take a few minutes actually to do a breakout group. And so again, this is where if your phone and your video aren't linked, that they'll need to be, because otherwise your video is going to go to one and your sound's going to go to another breakout group. And we're just going to do this to help both facilitate some discussion and some reflection on what you just heard and what you're feeling in this moment, and then kind of lead us into the beautiful panel and the organizers that we're going to hear from. So Eric will break us out into groups. If you're on video, you could, it'd be great to like show your video if you're comfortable so that you can talk to folks in your breakout group. And we're just asking folks to take, a minute, 2 minutes each in your small group. You'll have 3 to 4 people in it, and just reflect on what you're hearing, seeing, thinking, feeling in this moment. Eric, have you unmuted me? We hope everybody had a few minutes to have a fruitful conversation. And now we're going to hand it off to Thina and Hashim to kick it back to our panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Go ahead. Did you have something else?
I was just going to tell folks, I think that speaker view is the most beneficial in this on your webinar format, because then you can see who's speaking.
Yeah.
Instead of millions of little people.
Right. Thank you for that reminder. Hello, everyone. My name is Hashim Benford. I'm a program officer with the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing. Just want to say thank you again, everybody taking time out of your day to be part of this conversation. And I will let my co-moderator, Thina, introduce herself. Thina.
Hi, everyone. Thina Robinson-Mock with Communities for Just Schools Fund.
Awesome. So we have a powerful panel for you all lined up. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So just real quick, folks, just say your name, title, and what organization you're with. James, can you go first?
Hey everyone, my name is James Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of Power Youth Center for Social Change in Miami, Florida. Happy to be here.
Cool. And Carlil? Carlil, you on the line still?
Yes, he is, but I think, Carla, I think there's a sound issue.
Okay, we'll come back. Phil, are you on the line with us? Then let's go to Lady.
Hello, everybody. This is Lady Robledo. I am here with Puente, Arizona, particularly with the Cops at a Campus campaign.
Cool. So hopefully we'll figure out the audio, what's going on with Phil and Carlil by the time we ask them their question, and then they can introduce themselves. But we do have Phil Agnew on the line from Dream Defenders, and then we've got Carlil and Alex from Communities United. So I think you're going to kick us off with the first question.
Sure. All right. So we'll just jump right in. So we'll start off with James Lopez with Power Youth Center for Social Change in Miami. And I think that's particularly important because we know that Miami is literally less than an hour from Parkland, very close to the action. And so, James, we know that Power Youth Center for Social Change has been engaged in longstanding youth organizing around ending the criminalization of Black and Brown youth in Miami-Dade public schools, pushing for justice reinvestment, and doing all of that work through an explicit racial justice and intersectional lens. And so given your work to organize around policies at the local and state level, what does this Parkland moment mean for Power Youth organizers in Miami? And what must we do to stay the course in fighting for safer schools and communities? And I'll also mention that we know that you all were engaged in some solidarity actions last week during the walkout with Parkland youth that were pretty powerful. So if you can reflect on that, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so you know, I want to start by just naming that the majority of our membership is Black and Brown working class youth in Liberty City and Little Haiti and South Florida, which in many ways has a fundamentally different lifestyle in their schooling as opposed to the students in Parkland. And this moment is obviously a very intense moment for everyone. And we saw it as broadly two sort of buckets of opportunity for us. One was that there's a large scale group of newly activated students who are super hopeful, super interested in getting engaged in the movement that aren't tied to an organization that can help them push for policy change and actually be developed. And we like to believe that we can be one of those organizations that can help with that infrastructure. But not only just students, but parents who have never really been engaged, teachers and administration who's never really seen the purpose of an organization that does youth organizing are now active in this moment, reaching out to us, asking how can they be supportive, which is very exciting for us, but really calls to question the capacity that comes in with a smaller organization that now manages youth, but now has the opportunity to begin working with teachers, parents, unions, and the like. But we do see this as a broader opportunity to increase the capacity of our organizations in terms of membership and activists who are engaged. But the second piece also speaks to what we've already seen throughout history, is that when moments of crises like this happen, everybody's sort of up in a frantic, and through the frenzy, there's a fast track of implementation of policies that really damage working class Black and Brown youth in public education and really perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. And what we've seen in South Florida is in response to that, at the local level, both the school board district and the city of Miami are pulling money essentially out of thin air to ask for more police in public schools. And what that looks like was, for example, $30 million is being asked from the state of Florida by the school board to have more police officers in schools. They do have some language in there around mental health, but a lot of that is also expenditures around automatic locked doors, bulletproof glass, and we're really questioning the overall amount of money that is going to punitive measures and what we want, which is investment in overall human development, right? Overall student supports, more mental health counselors, and that hasn't really been prioritized. And then in the city of Miami, there was an original proposal for $4.5 million that would go as a mutual aid proposal to the school board for additional police officers in every school, has now been bumped up after a feasibility study to $22 million. So even at a local level, we've seen over $50 million go towards almost solely more police in schools at a time where we've been advocating with local officials and school board members for more implementation of programs and policies that prioritize human development, and the elected officials telling us and our young people, well, where are we going to get the money from? Right? That our cash has been strapped. So we've also seen this opportunity where our young people are really being politicized in the way that education is just grossly under-resourced, underfunded, and militarization is prioritized over that. So with that, although this is a huge tragic moment, the young people, particularly working class Black and brown youth in South Florida, now see the role that they play in helping shift the narrative in a way that where schools can actually invest funding that prioritizes overall safe and supportive environments as opposed to just police. And then lastly, of course, at the statewide level, you see over $650 million going towards an overall rehaul of more police and security in schools, with also the cash incentive of arming teachers should a district so choose. So this moment presents to us an opportunity for increasing our organizations, but our membership is seeing every single day the blatant contradiction that is the state tends to prioritize punishment over human development, which is exciting for us because that's where we want, but because the local, in terms of we want our young people to see that, but the action at the local level is being moved so quickly because of the moment that we're also being strapped for capacity because we have to we have to actually fight back against the local legislation that is moving at a very quick pace due to people wanting to respond to that moment. So I say that to say, you know, our organization is really clear about developing the leadership of Black and brown youth. But this moment is also a larger moment where we can combat sort of the narratives that pit certain demographics in certain school and students against each other, and to really fight against a common enemy across class, across race. And that's really pushing for an overall new way of thinking about education, which we continue to harp on, which is prioritizing human development over control and punitive measures.
Thank you, Dan. I think that's a really beautiful and eloquent opening. Thanks for setting us up. Let's keep it in Miami and go to Phil. I think we've got the tech issues worked out. So yeah. Phil, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, most definitely. Good to hear your voice, brother. So tell us, Phil, so I think in a lot of ways it's almost like full circle, I think. I can imagine for Dream Defenders, because your organization, y'all formed in the wake of a tragic shooting, right? So another tragic example of gun violence in Florida. Very different circumstance, though. After the shooting of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of George Zimmerman, y'all took some very high-profile action and really helped kickstart a new wave of organizing young people in South Florida. And since then, have become a force, have also been a key leader in the national movement for Black Lives, ending, fighting to end criminalization. And in the days and weeks following Parkland, you all reached out along with Power U to the youth at Parkland. You sent that beautiful letter that was posted on Instagram to offer support and talk about your alignment around demands. And so I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit more about, from Dream Defenders' perspective, why this moment is critical and how does it fit into your long-term fight against criminalization and fighting for safer schools, safer communities, and ultimately to get our people free.
Yes. So thank you very much. I'm on headphones and moving around, so if there's an echo or it's too loud, just let me know. My name is Philip Agnew. As stated, I'm the co-director for the Dream Defenders. Happy to follow James, happy to be on the call with so many people that have helped to move us along. When this happened, there were a number of pieces published or social media statuses written and posted around, similarities between the Dream Defenders and the young people at Parkland. And then there began a slew of articles talking about how different the response was to Parkland students and to the Dream Defenders. And I think during these moments, we're forced to think of similarities and compare apples to apples. And then this weird thing happens where walls are built up between these movement moments to separate them, to delineate them, and to really draw them apart. And our analysis, as was stated, has always been that each one of these moments, whether it be in Ferguson or in Baltimore or in Oakland or now once again in Florida, are another opportunity for us to advance the long arc of our movement. And each one of these moments are only connected by the bridges that our organizing can build. And so we did reach out to the students in Parkland, and it took a little while. They had multiple rings of people around them. And we were able to connect with them about 2 weeks after the shooting. By then they had, had 1 million followers on Instagram and on Twitter. And they took the time and we sat down with them and we were able to talk about the vision that we had for Florida. I'll concede that James and I and all the other organizations have a particular advantage in this moment because unfortunately this is once again happening in Florida. And so we had the opportunity to talk to them about what was our vision for Florida. And so what's come out of that is not only a really great relationship, great rapport built between our organizations, but we've actually been able to put together some incredible conversations with Power U, Dream Defenders, a number of local organizations. We had a town hall about 10 days ago that had 150 youth, some youth from Parkland, and young people from around the city of Miami who had never had the opportunity to talk about what they were going through. And they were able to follow the leadership of young people from Power U who held that space like experts. And the Parkland students were in awe of kind of what we have been able to build together. That was a partnership. What we're doing next is we're sending a bunch of people up to DC this weekend. And that's all building to this event that we're going to be doing on April 9th. That is going to be not another town hall, but a discussion about what we're going to do together to shift the state of Florida. And we're calling that event From the Bullet to the Ballot. And what we're going to be working on throughout the year is continuing the work that Dream Defenders and Power U has been doing, going to high schools around the state, going to colleges around the state, talking to college and high school age youth who have been pushed out about the power actually that we have in this moment. It is an election year in Florida. We're electing a governor, we're electing an attorney general, and we also have the opportunity to bring the franchise back to 1.68 million people who have lost it. Many of them probably lost it before they graduated from high school because of a felony conviction. And so this year, it would behoove us to not use this as an opportunity to separate or build walls, but as was stated before, to build bridges, because we can actually use this as a year where we build real power across race and class and build a real political block of high school students, of college students, and of high school and college age people who, in the matter of a few months, can have a big say in who the next governor, who the next attorney general, and who the next voting base of people in the state is. And so that's how we see this moment, as a great evolution in the movement, but on a practical level as an opportunity for us to finally be able to build the infrastructure we need to prevent these things from happening.
Thank you so much, Phil. We are now going to turn to Chicago and talk to Communities United. We're going to turn to you, Carlil. I'm going to make sure that you are unmuted. Let's see. Okay, looks like you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I don't know what was going on. I had to switch my laptop to my phone, back to the laptop. All right.
All good, all good. So Carlil, the organizing work of Communities United has led to important wins around ending the school to prison pipeline at the local and state level, pushing for safe and supportive schools through your justice reinvestment work. We know that your local work is rooted in Chicago, where we know that communities of color have been organizing to address intra-community gun violence. And we know that recently, young people from Chicago had a chance to actually connect and build with Parkland youth in solidarity around shared concerns around gun violence. So same question, what does this Parkland moment mean for you and your work? And what needs to happen to help us stay the course towards the kinds of victories that your organization has achieved?
Yeah, so I would say, speaking back to what Jamie said at the beginning of the call, was right, this wasn't just a Parkland moment, right? So for our youth and our students, this is an everyday thing we've been dealing with for a very long time, fighting for a very long time, local and state level. And part of that was the SB 100 victory we had with ending zero tolerance policies in schools, which help keep students in schools and helping keep students off the streets. But that's just a part of it, but it's actually the part of where, we're still losing countless numbers of youth on our streets due to the lack of funding, the lack of resources, and not having the proper things that we need to keep these youth healthy, mentally, keep them engaged, keep them off the streets. And we've had the opportunity, because we work with youth in it's a different community. So our youth in North Lawndale community actually had the opportunity to be able to meet with the Parkland students. They were very excited about being able to share narrative with the students. And one of the major things that we've been taking into consideration is that as well as we are in solidarity with the Parkland students and everything, but for our students, they want to be able to share and make sure that they know that their sense of gun violence and what the needs of it may be a little different than what they calls for. So the national narrative, as we know, has been moving around gun control, stricter gun laws, and eventually pushing for folks to say we need more police and more SROs in schools, which in our community, our youth and our people of color have been at the mercy of that for a long time, being over criminalized, and not having the real cause and real need to get to the answer. So for this moment for us, really being able to use this platform to uplift our shared narrative of our youth, to be able to come together and say, hey, we stand in support for what you guys are trying to do, but hear us out. Like we've been speaking out for so long. Now let us say it again. You have the opportunity to connect with youth across the city of Chicago, but as well as in Baltimore through a similar contact, to be able to create this movement similar to what's happening in Parkland, but with the narrative of we need these resources and not stricter gun control. And our youth decided to call it GKMC, Good Kids Mass City. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter page and everything, getting t-shirts. They're very excited about it. But on that stand, being able to have youth to be able to go out and our youth who are continuing the relationship with Parkland students, be able to have those conversations with them and are participating in the march happening in DC, as well as we have a big march of about 30,000 folks happening downtown in Chicago, which we're going to have students at both who are speaking at both to be able to keep lifting that narrative up and being able to keep reaching out to more groups to making sure we have a shared narrative, to have a shared messaging to really get to the root answer for what we need, knowing that gun control is one part of it for some folks, but knowing that this isn't a single solution answer to really get to the needs of what we're fighting for.
Right on. Thank you, Carlil. And last but certainly not least, we're going to kick it back to Lady from Puente, Arizona. So Lady, last year, Puente launched the Cops Out of Campus campaign in Phoenix, calling for an end to the presence of police officers in schools because as we saw in the video, there's a direct correlation between having a police presence and increases in the school to prison pipeline and the school to deportation pipeline for Black and brown youth. So can you share with us some of the work that you all are doing in Puente of how you're using this moment to put forward a different type of narrative around school safety, what that narrative is and how y'all are going about doing it?
Yeah, so I think for us, like we've always seen how the United States has always declared a war on issues. We know that there was like the war on drugs, the war on crime, the war on terrorism, but none of those wars actually address some of the root causes of the issues that our community were facing. And I think the way we see how we see the issues right now happening in schools very similar. We're trying to stop us responding in the same way. Last year we started Cops at a Campus. We actually launched this after Trump took office because our understanding of the deportation machine shifted. We knew that it was almost impossible to stop deportation cases and procedures, and it was almost impossible to start getting people out of detention. So as all these openings that we've had in the past, that we had won through years of organizing closed, we started looking at the machine and saying, actually, we need to stop people from coming in contact with the machine. Like we have very little hope once they're in the system, right? And so from our understanding, we started, doing a lot of research and ended up seeing the impact that police officers in our schools, which are police officers, have, and the risks that our young people, particularly our young undocumented people, students of color, had. And then here in Arizona, especially with SB 1070 being fully implemented by Phoenix PD, by all law enforcement in the state, we knew that we had to make sure that we had to reduce the contact between law enforcement and our youth of color, particularly our undocumented youth of color. And that's actually how we launched Cops at a Campus. I think right now, this moment, so we've been fighting to get Phoenix Union to remove police officers from the schools. From our conversations, they have recognized that the police, that there's institutional racism and that police come in with bias, and that they agree that police shouldn't be doing discipline policies. And they even changed some of the MOU so that police officers couldn't ask for documents from students, like their documentation and their immigration status in schools. But for us, like, that's not enough. Again, because the contact, any contact with police officer, any access police officers have beyond the schools is a risk that's too big, and we do not want to lose any young people to a police officer, right? The risk is too big, and again, because we understand that it's almost impossible to stop a deportation procedure to get somebody out of the system, we know that we don't want to risk that. I think right now, one of the biggest issues that we're seeing, again, is, there's a lot of lack of education in the issue of SRO in schools. Part of it is because data collection is really shady in our school system. Even though their schools are required to report it, nobody really enforces whether they report it or not. Like, one of the first things we found in the district was the district hadn't been reporting the last couple of years what their police officers were doing. And so there's a lack of education from the public. When you actually sit down and talk to parents, they say, no, the first reaction is police equals safety. But then when you actually break down, that there's no real evidence that really shows that police officers make schools safer. And when you actually show the data of these are the stories of the students that are having these interactions with police officers, you quickly see the difference. There's the perception that our community, our parents have, a community have, is not really, there's no real data that's really, there's no accountability on these police officers. I think the other piece too is, so we were already fighting, this past year in like getting a lot of the educational pieces, because there's no data. Like we have to go on, like we have to actually find these stories, these individual stories, to actually show what police officers are doing in the schools. And then I think as we were trying to gather all this educational information, then the shooting in Florida happened, which brings in like an entire level of again, there's an entire level of education, political education, that needs to happen in our community. One of our biggest concerns, though, was that whatever the solution was to the violence of school shootings, we needed to make sure that the zero tolerance policies were not added to whatever law, whatever changes were gonna happen. We were very clear that giving police officers, schools, and even states more power to criminalize our youth meant that more youth of color are gonna be pushed out of schools and into the prison system. So like that's one of the things that we were very, very clear, and our young people were very clear about. As the national narrative took off, and there was youth-led actions being organized locally, because we already had a base and we were already organizing around the issue of SRO, it allowed us to have capacity to host spaces where young people can come and actually talk about their experience in schools. And for us, it was very important to go beyond just gun control and really talk about all the violence that our young people face in schools. So one of the first things that we did, we hosted a youth speak out, where young people were invited to come in and share just experiences beyond, again, what are the other forms of school violence that they face. Then also the other thing that we did, we were able to connect with some of the young people that were organizing actions on March 14th, and we were able to organize an action at the governor's office, because the governor's also trying to propose bills that do include increasing police officers in schools, and that include arming teachers in the schools here in the state. So in addition to all the work that we were already, like a lot of the education we were already planning to do, now we have an entire layer of educational material that we have to do. But I think for us, it's key that the groups that lead this work have to have a racial justice lens to them, because if not, then again, right, the risk is that these zero tolerance policies get passed. And that's happened in the past. Every time there's a tragic event and we push for zero tolerance, unfortunately we take advantage of people's fears and the stories, the crisis, to add these zero tolerance policies. And so what happens is our young people are the ones that have to pay the price. I think the other piece around why we think it's important for our young people of color to be at the center of these conversations and attending the tables where these decisions are being made is because we're seeing a risk of people co-opting our movements, right? Here in Arizona, for example, we had the leader of the Young Republicans Club, like a high school, it's a college club, and it's also in a few high schools. He left the Republican Party saying, like, I don't agree with how the Republican Party is taking on the issue on gun control. And so, like, now he's the one that's being pushed into the spotlight by the right. But all his other politics are against everything that we've been building the last couple of years. And so for us, that's why it's also very important that we continue to increase our educational material, but also our capacity to educate people, right? This Cops at a Campus began less than a year ago, right? And so for us, it's very important for us to be able to grow the work so that we don't lose all of the victories that we've done in the past year.
Thank you, lady. This is so on point. And just to let folks know, we are going to try to squeeze in a couple of questions from the viewers out there. So if you have a question that you'd like to pose to the panelists, please chat it in the chat box to Monica Cordova. Don't send it to everybody, but send the questions to Monica. And then if we can squeeze one in before we have to wrap up, she'll share it to the panelists. So, because we are going to try to have some time for the questions, we're just going to go back through one more time, panelists, and actually build off of this piece that Lady just touched on, which this question of capacity. This is a funder briefing, right? So we want to talk about resources. And I think y'all have each touched on how you have used this moment to pivot what you were doing to build in an even bigger way. But your staff and your organizations haven't grown exponentially to meet that challenge, right? Building off of the point that Jamie made earlier in the presentation. So I was wondering if we just go really quickly, like a couple of sentences each, if you could just share a couple of words about like what you feel like are the key resources that you need to be able to both kind of capture this moment, as well as building towards the long-term goals that you all have. So why don't we start with James, if you can respond to that, and then we'll just go in the same order that we just went through.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, just resources to help with staffing to begin trying to cultivate new relationships that have been activated in this moment. And then also just general support for logistics for some of the more broader trips that we're having, traveling up to DC, and then which I am assuming sort of future conversations with other communities around gun violence that holistically come to mind.
Cool. Phil?
Yeah, I would echo that. We need money to be able to resource people to be able to follow up and keep in touch. We need organizers. It was brought up on a previous conversation I was in, but I think we need places for us to convene all of these young people. We've had a number of events that we've had to move to different locations because we couldn't find the space and the quick turnaround that we needed. So spaces to convene people is incredibly important. So organizer spaces. And then one thing else I would say is it always gets overlooked, especially for dream offenders, but money for printing. I think email and social media and text are all really incredibly valuable tools to communicate. But we found in recent months and years really that nothing beats being able to hand somebody a piece of paper at the drop of a dime and be able to talk to them. So money for printing, or the infrastructure to be able to print for ourselves and not have to go. These are things that we don't have. But thank you.
Or Carlil, same question.
Same question, same answer. I think you just need the resources, whether it's rapid response, it's like quick turnaround for immediate things, like the march stuff happened this weekend, actually helping us like funding for putting together documentaries to actually be able to record all this stuff. The same is long-term support as we're trying to keep this movement going. We don't want this movement to die out like a lot of things, but being able to keep the momentum going until we actually get to where it is that we're trying to go. So just say support.
Yeah. And I just want to do a special plug because I know that Carlil Communities United is working with a documentary film crew that have been doing a documentary with y'all on like your school to prison pipeline stuff, and now they want to do some stuff on the march. And so I know y'all specifically are trying to raise a little bit of money so you can get some like high quality footage in DC this weekend, right?
Yeah, so we're actually I think that they're meeting right now actually, but I couldn't make it. But they're trying to get some folks to actually take the bus with students out to DC, at the march, do like some individual videos, like confessional type things with some students, but at the same time having someone also recording the local march that we're doing in Chicago, and then putting it all together for a documentary.
Oh. So funders, if you're wondering how you can make a quick and easy difference, a few thousand will go a long way just this weekend. And Lady, same question to you.
I think that I had already mentioned this, but again, because the data is so shady, and with the issue of SROs, it just means that it's so much more work for us in order to just be able to prove some of our, some of the issues that we already see. So definitely wanting to find new ways of getting research done. For us, I think one of the things that we realized too is groups either tend to be doing youth organizing or they tend to be doing, some of the arts. And for us, it's so important to combine. I think especially because it is a youth movement, we need more funding for our arts because that is something that's more sustainable. And then I think the other part too is also, of course, rapid response. This moment is so important for us to build coalitions, long-term coalitions and alliances, but we need to be able to sustain that.
Great, thank y'all. I'm gonna pass it over to Monica, see if we have any questions, and then I think you're also gonna move us to wrap it up.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that if all of the organizers on the call could drop their contact information into the chat in case folks want to get in contact with you. So whatever, and if you're not the right person for folks on this call to get in contact because you're getting inundated with too much, like whoever the appropriate contact person in your organization is, and number, email, whatever the best form is, because we're having some questions about how folks can connect with you. And so if folks are able to access you, then that would be great. So if the panelists could do that. We have a question from Gretchen, who is interested in who is tracking any school systems that are utilizing the DOJ grants that issue police officers so long as they comply and support ICE. Is there any information or tracking on this? And I think this for Lady or anybody else who might be able to respond to that.
So yeah, no, there's no one tracking that. That's one of the issues too that we faced as well.
Great, thank you, Lady. Yeah, so back to your comment about research and the need for the ability to support that research. Jamie, do you have any questions that you're receiving?
I haven't had any come through to me. I would just actually add, if I might, to Gretchen's great question that folks have been talking a lot about the need to track what precedes Parkland also around the arming of teachers. This is not a new phenomenon. It's already happening in some places. So that is another data set that folks are eager to have so that we can seek to dismantle the existence of the data set.
Great. And we might have time for a question or two if anybody else wants to quickly chat something. We have a question about when the Chicago March is. Is that happening this week, Carlo?
Yeah,
I thought that was Evelyn.
I'm sorry, I'm at a high school. It's happening this Saturday, Union Park, from 11 to about 2:30. So it's a whole rally happening.
Great. Well, we see it. Go ahead, Jamie.
Just a practical matter. I know Phil's on the phone. So Phil, do you want us to share your contact information or someone else from Dream Defenders?
Sure, you can share mine, and then I can text Stina, our development coordinator, as well.
Perfect.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you, Phil. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Thank you all.
We have a question about how are participants, including DC youth organizers during their visit? I don't know if that question is fully formed quite yet.
Have any of you connected with any youth organizers on the ground here in DC? And if not, if the person asking the question wants to actually suggest groups that they think it would be good to make connections with, we'd be happy to help facilitate.
Yeah. So this is Philip again. We have been able to connect, and I think we're working with you all now to find a location that can accommodate students from Miami, Chicago, DC, Broward, Baltimore. And so we've been able to connect. I'm not the point person on the trip, so I can't speak to what works, but I do know an event is happening the 24th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
And Gretchen has mentioned from OSF that she can host. So wanting to make that connection, Phil, with you, and I don't know if there's anything we can do to help facilitate the two of you connecting.
Oh, that's awesome. We're connected. Gretchen, it's over 200 youth. So that's so neat.
Wait, she said, wait, we'll talk. So the two of you, the two of you connect after this, I think, and figure out what makes sense. We want to, so we'll continue to chat. I think Phil, Dina's going to chat your information in and see if you all can continue to make the connection. And I just want to let folks know that we are compiling. I know we were dropping a lot of information in the chat. Don't worry. And then we had slides and a lot going on in the video. And we hope that all of that made this a very interactive session for you. And we will send it all out to you post this so that you can have it to reference and share with other colleagues and friends post this, as well as the recording for this brief. Jamie, did you have any closing remarks as we close out the webinar?
Just tremendous gratitude. We've had a great level of participation from a large number of people, and it means a lot, I know, to us, and I'm sure to our partners who've joined us today. We're grateful to them for the time they've invested, and we're grateful to you for the resources you've already invested and those we hope you will invest as a result of this conversation.
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you for everybody that's joined us. Thank you for all of our panelists and our moderators. And I do want to make it clear that both FCYO and Communities for Just Schools Fund have rapid response funds. And we just feel that there's an abundance of resources out there. And whoever you want to connect with, if you're interested in getting money to the ground, we have processes that will quickly turn it around. And as long as you're connecting with one of us or organizations directly, we feel wonderful about that. And so if there's anything that we can do in follow-up, we'll be sending our contact information out as well. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I like how the chat is going. Yay, good job, everybody. That was like really phenomenal. Thank you, Carlyle, Lady, Phil, and James, if you're still on.
That was inspiring, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad I figured that out. I'm telling you, I don't know what was going on. Like I was on an hour